It's funny, the more time you spend on social media, the more you begin to question things that you see. Stuff that you would have perhaps assumed was real. It's a news story. You figure, yeah, well, that seems legitimate. Turns out we're getting to see a proliferation of what are basically news sites that are AI originally created, modified. I'm not even sure how to describe this, which is why we have a guest. Derek Ruths is a professor of computer science at McGill and is on the line. Derek, thanks for being here this afternoon. Look, I'm trying to understand the original story that kind of brought this to light, where CTV News here, right, gets updated about a story that appeared in French media on LCN. The whole thing turned out to be fake, and then it leads you down this sort of, rabbit hole, if you will, to where you begin to realize these things are everywhere. I guess my first question would be, never mind if you're a news organization, but if you're just the average person online getting your news, from whatever site you are, how do you even know that it's legitimate?
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to join you today. And I mean, this is a really pressing question for all of us. I would point out two things. The first is that when we're getting information online, it's all about trust. And the question is, what is the basis that we have for trusting whatever site it is that we're looking at? So, for example, if we pick up a news site, you mentioned CTV. CTV is a well-known news site. Like any news outlet, they may have their particular take or lean on things, but in general, we know that they're accredited journalists who are, who are doing their best to report on information as they see it, and as a result, we know what to expect from a particular outlet like that. When we're interacting with a random website that we may have clicked on from off of social media, if we don't recognize that site, we should immediately be cautious when approaching that information.
Yeah, but you know what? If I can, though, the issue with that, I guess, for me is you spent the time scrolling through it. You see a headline that seems legitimate. You're not really spending the time to see if it comes from a legitimate source or not. The headline looks real. You've seen or heard about the story. That makes it even more difficult, doesn't it?
I mean, it's an uncomfortable thing to say, but the important thing is if you end up on a site where that you're not familiar with, that you don't recognize the name that is in your web browser, don't trust it.
Okay. Although in the case, I think, of CTV, it looked like it actually came from LCN, from the network, because they'd even used their logo.
In the case of LCN, if we go back to that site, perhaps somewhere on the page it used that logo, but the site itself was clearly branded something else. Mm-hmm. And so simply looking at it, LCNtoday. I forget what the extension was, it was not a site that I had ever seen, and immediately my radar goes up. Okay. So, it can be really satisfying to read an article or read a news piece that seems like it's confirming something that we find exciting or even really believe. But if we don't recognize the site, we really we can't assume that it's true.
I guess my next question is, why do these sites even exist? And I know the obvious answer is because you get clicks, and that's enough to make them money, to allow them to keep doing this? Is that the bottom line?
There's two reasons. One of them is exactly as you say, they're trying to make money, and that's off of just attention and clicks on ads. But there's a more concerning reason, which is that some of them are actually set up by agents that want to actually influence what we think and how we behave. And so if you take a foreign actor, they may actually want to convince Canadians to believe something that we might not otherwise actually believe. And that kind of influence that they can have is incredibly valuable to foreign actors, particularly those that may not actually have Canadian interests at heart.
So this is not just about taking a story that was generated by a legitimate news site and putting it up and changing the facts just to drive clicks. You're suggesting there's something obviously much more, I don't know, pick the word here, dangerous potentially. What are they doing? Are they doing something in the body of the story that they then post?
Well, what they're doing is they are trying to create an experience that we mostly trust. They're trying to create a site that we might come back to over and time again. Okay. And so they're not necessarily trying to convince us completely of a particular idea or belief. They're trying to just plant the seeds. And so it's not one story that's going to necessarily completely shift us into, believing something wildly different, but they want to create these nudges. They want to create evidence that many Canadians have seen, so that over time it erodes our ability to actually know what we actually believe, or perhaps erodes our commitment to what we might think of as Canadian values.
Okay, so the message here to anybody, and because so many people get their news this way, I mean, you study this, so you're aware of what to look for. What should the average person be looking for to question when they come across something like this? How would you even know it outside of looking at the IP address?
I mean, two things that are very straightforward. The first is it a site that you trust? So look up at the top of your web browser, and if what that says, if that's not saying CTV or CBC or some news site that you are comfortable with, immediately be skeptical. The second is look at who wrote the article. And you should be able to search that person up, and you should be able to find information about that person. In the case of the article that you're referencing, CTV, if you search that person, they don't exist. Like, they literally have no presence on the internet, and that's another really strong sign that we're dealing with fake news.
Okay. I would ask, I guess just as a follow-up, if this is something that you're seeing, right, on a regular basis, someone said, well, if there's ads on it, maybe that's your tip-off. But it seems to me as well, even legitimate news sites will run ads as well. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. Ads are no longer an indicator of that. I mean, it might be that the volume of them might be a bit more of an indicator, but the reality is that that most mainstream platforms are also making some revenue off of ads. So that's no longer a good indicator.
And the last thing I would ask is, so this is obviously a problem. It's only going to get bigger. Are governments somehow being involved? Are they asked to get involved? Where do we stand on actually policing these things?
Well, I think that's a big open question, and it's definitely part of the political discussion, and it's part of the policy discussion. I think that there is a role for government, but it's also really tricky because we also believe in an open discussion and communication on the internet. We believe in a global internet, and going in and figuring out where these are, it's a bit of a whack-a-mole, because the moment that we block one, they can just pop up somewhere else.
Right.
So it's incredibly hard to police, and it's also incredibly hard to know exactly what to do with them, because we are dealing with questions of sort of freedom of speech and expression, which are important social values.
I was going to say something like, well, I guess we're all doomed, because it seems too difficult to have to, ask an average, consumer or person, at least, who is trying to consume their news from the internet to spend the time, make the effort, and whatever else. And we kind of have to hope for the best here at the end of the day, the way it sounds.
I mean, I'm more hopeful than that, in the sense that, if you think about most people, we know not to walk down dark alleys. We know sketchy situations when we see them, and we stay away from them. Now, that's not to say that we can't do more to create safe environments, safe information environments. But I think that there's a lot that we can do in terms of raising people's awareness and just a bit of that sort of savviness when we're online. And we're not, from an education perspective, I don't think that we've done enough. And so there's a lot of opportunity both in formal education and in the information world just itself to actually help people know when to be skeptical. This conversation is a great example, so I appreciate you guys doing that.
No, listen, it is something that we're going to have to spend more time paying attention to. I wonder, too, it seems odd to me that in an age of AI, that AI itself can't, when you go read an article, suggest you, hey, you might want to double check on this, it doesn't look kosher, but I guess we're not at that stage yet.
Well, there are tools for that, actually. They haven't become mainstream, but there are people thinking about this, and there are some really promising efforts where that's concerned. I don't think it's going to totally solve the problem, because ultimately it comes down to what we are willing to believe as individuals and as groups and communities. But I think that AI-equipped tools may be part of the solution here.
Derek, I appreciate the time, and I thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Take
Thanks.
Good care. Derek Ruths over at the Computer Science at McGill University. I just think, I was taking such great pleasure in realizing sometimes when you got a fake email, right? You look at the IP address, you'd know, even though it looked like it could be legit from a bank or whatever, and then you'd see the IP address and it would be, ... and not that bank. So you knew there was something going on. But in this case, this seems to be even much more difficult, I think, to be able to spot something that's not real and has been picked up from somewhere else, then remanipulated, if you will, and now we're all assuming, oh, you're reading a legit story. That's scary.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This
is bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years.
And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.